Chosen one, this message finding you right now is no accident. It's divine confirmation that what your spirit has been screaming about is absolutely real. Those gut feelings, those sleepless nights, those people who suddenly turned cold without explanation, every instinct that told you something sinister was happening behind your back was correct, and the universe has orchestrated this moment to deliver the truth that will shatter every lie they told you about yourself. There are figures that have been central to this conspiracy, and their roles will become devastatingly clear as this truth unfolds. The first is someone who presented themselves as brilliant, calculating, and indispensable to your life. This person studied you like a science project, mapping your vulnerabilities, cataloging your gifts, and building a psychological profile that would later be used as a weapon against you. They were the architect of your destruction, cold and methodical in their approach. This mastermind operated with the calculated precision of someone who had done this before. They knew exactly how to position themselves in your life to gain maximum access to your energy, your resources, and your spiritual gifts. Every conversation was a mining expedition, every shared moment an opportunity to extract information that would later be weaponized against you. They presented themselves as your greatest supporter, while simultaneously orchestrating your downfall. This person wasn't acting alone, or even out of personal vendetta. They were part of something much larger, something that had been hunting chosen ones for generations. You weren't their first target, and they had no intention of you being their last. They had perfected a system of spiritual predation that had claimed other light-bearers before you, individuals whose stories never made it to the surface because their destruction was so complete. The second figure operated as the seducer, the one who was supposed to bind you through emotional manipulation and false intimacy. This person was tasked with creating an artificial connection, a spiritual trap disguised as love or deep friendship. Their mission was to weave themselves so deeply into your energy field that extracting them would feel like losing a part of yourself. They practiced dark arts specifically designed to create artificial bonds, using techniques that mimic genuine spiritual connection while serving an entirely different purpose. This individual spent months, perhaps years, studying your patterns, your desires, your deepest needs. They crafted a persona specifically designed to appeal to your authentic self, becoming exactly what you thought you were seeking in another person. Every romantic gesture, every moment of seeming vulnerability, every declaration of connection was carefully calculated to lower your defenses and create energetic entanglement. But what they didn't count on was the strength of your divine protection. Their attempts at binding failed repeatedly, though they couldn't understand why. They tried love spells, energy manipulation, even attempting to create karmic bonds through manufactured shared experiences. Each failure frustrated them more, driving them to increasingly desperate measures that would ultimately contribute to their downfall. The failure of their seduction campaign created a cascade of problems within their network. The mastermind had promised certain outcomes, had built their larger plan around the assumption that you would be successfully ensnared. When that didn't happen, when you remained energetically free despite their best efforts, cracks began to appear in their carefully constructed alliance. The third figure played the innocent, the one who seemed harmless, perhaps even supportive, but who was actually gathering intelligence and spreading carefully crafted lies about your character. This person moved through your social circles like a virus, poisoning relationships and isolating you from genuine allies. They specialized in making you question your own perception of reality, gaslighting you with such skill that you began to doubt your own intuitive warnings about what was happening around you. This individual's role was perhaps the most insidious because they operated under the cover of concern and friendship. They would approach mutual friends with carefully crafted stories about your behavior, your mental state, your reliability. They planted seeds of doubt that grew into full-blown mistrust, systematically dismantling your support network while positioning themselves as the voice of reason and stability. But their greatest skill was in making you complicit in your own isolation. They would report back conversations that painted you in an unfavorable light, share concerns that others had supposedly expressed about you, and slowly convince you that perhaps you were the problem in every deteriorating relationship. This psychological warfare was designed to break your confidence in your own judgment, making you more dependent on their interpretation of reality. Someone they thought was weak, someone they dismissed as unimportant, began to see through their game. This person may be a family member who had been watching from the sidelines, maybe someone they considered intellectually inferior, started connecting dots they thought were invisible. The very person they underestimated became their downfall. This witness had been present for conversations they thought were private, had overheard planning sessions they assumed were secure, had been treated as furniture while they discussed their strategies for your destruction. But this person possessed something the conspirators lacked: genuine love for you, and an unshakable moral compass that wouldn't allow them to stand by while evil unfolded. Initially, this witness struggled with what they were seeing and hearing. The magnitude of the conspiracy seemed too vast, too evil to be real. They questioned their own perceptions, wondered if they were misunderstanding the situation, grappled with the implications of what they were discovering. But as evidence mounted, as patterns became undeniable, they made a choice that would change everything. The decision to act wasn't easy. This person knew that exposing the conspiracy would mean betraying relationships they had valued, facing retaliation from dangerous individuals, and potentially putting themselves in harm's way. But they also understood that silence made them complicit in your planned destruction, and their conscience wouldn't allow that burden. Meanwhile, someone else entirely had been watching from an even more hidden vantage point. A figure operating in the shadows, gathering evidence, connecting patterns, and building a case that would eventually bring the entire network crashing down. This person possessed a combination of intelligence, determination, and moral conviction that made them absolutely relentless in their pursuit of justice. They weren't just investigating a crime, they were dismantling an entire system of spiritual corruption. This investigator had been tracking similar cases for years, following a pattern of chosen ones who had been targeted, manipulated, and in some cases destroyed by organized spiritual predators. They had seen the aftermath of successful attacks, light-bearers whose gifts had been stolen, whose purposes had been derailed, whose very souls had been damaged beyond repair. Each case had added another piece to a puzzle that was finally becoming clear. What made this investigator unique was their ability to work across multiple realms simultaneously. They gathered evidence in the physical world while also tracking the spiritual crimes being committed. They understood that justice in such cases required intervention on every level of existence, that stopping these predators meant addressing both their earthly actions and their metaphysical violations. The investigation had been building for months, with the investigator carefully documenting every move the conspirators made against you. They recorded conversations, tracked financial exchanges, mapped the network of individuals involved, and most importantly, they gathered proof of previous victims. This wasn't a case about attempted harm, this was a case about successful murders, spiritual and sometimes physical, that had been covered up for years. As pressure mounted from the investigation, as their plans continued to fail, as you remained frustratingly protected despite their best efforts, the conspirators began turning on each other. The mastermind, drunk on their own perceived cleverness, made a fatal error. They became so convinced of their superiority that they started treating their accomplices as expendable pawns. The seducer, already frustrated by their inability to bind you, began to feel used and discarded by the mastermind's increasingly demanding expectations. They had risked exposure, had invested significant energy in their failed campaign, and had received nothing but criticism for their inability to deliver the promised results. Resentment festered, creating vulnerabilities in their united front. The innocent, meanwhile, found themselves under increasing scrutiny as their lies began to unravel. People who had initially believed their carefully crafted stories started asking questions, started comparing notes, started noticing inconsistencies in the narrative they had been spreading. The isolation campaign that had seemed so successful was backfiring as mutual friends began to see through the manipulation. Trust eroded within their ranks like acid eating through metal. Each member of the conspiracy began to suspect the others of planning to sacrifice them to save themselves. Paranoia replaced cooperation, accusations flew in multiple directions, and the united front they had presented began to crumble into open hostility. But the mastermind's most catastrophic error was underestimating the spiritual forces they had awakened through their attacks on you. Their attempts to steal your gifts, to penetrate your divine protection, to manipulate your destiny, had triggered responses from realms they couldn't perceive or understand. Ancient guardians that had been dormant in your bloodline awakened to active protection. Ancestral spirits that had been silently watching stepped forward to intervene. As their spiritual sight was systematically stripped away as punishment for their crimes against divine order, the mastermind found themselves operating blind in a reality they could no longer navigate. They couldn't read energy anymore, couldn't sense danger approaching, couldn't even trust their own instincts. Every attempt to spy on your progress, every effort to predict your next move, only revealed their own powerlessness. This spiritual blindness drove them to increasingly erratic behavior. They became obsessed with surveillance, desperately trying to penetrate the protective barrier that had formed around you through purely physical means. They sought out other spiritual practitioners, hoping to gain insight into your situation, not realizing that their own connection to divine wisdom had been permanently severed. The irony was devastating. In their attempt to steal your spiritual gifts, they had lost their own. In their effort to bind you to their will, they had bound themselves to a fate they couldn't escape. In their plan to control your destiny, they had surrendered all control over their own. Meanwhile, divine protection around you intensified in ways that defied explanation. Animal spirits began appearing in your life with unusual frequency, as if the natural world itself was mobilizing to shield you from harm. Your intuition sharpened to supernatural levels, allowing you to navigate situations with wisdom far beyond your years. Dreams became prophetic, synchronicities multiplied, and doors began opening that had previously seemed permanently sealed. The strengthening of your spiritual defenses created ripple effects that the conspirators couldn't understand or counteract. Every ritual they performed against you backfired spectacularly, sending their own negative energy ricocheting back to them with compounded force. Their attempts to drain your vitality instead left them exhausted and depleted. Their efforts to cloud your judgment only clarified your perception of their true nature. This spiritual boomerang effect began manifesting in their physical lives as well. The mastermind found themselves plagued by inexplicable accidents, technical failures, and social disasters that seemed to strike whenever they intensified their attacks against you. Equipment would malfunction during crucial moments, important documents would mysteriously disappear, and allies would suddenly become unavailable when their support was most needed. The seducer experienced their own form of cosmic justice as their ability to manipulate others gradually diminished. People who had previously been susceptible to their charm began seeing through their facade without explanation. Romantic prospects would lose interest overnight, friends would distance themselves for reasons they couldn't articulate, and professional relationships would sour without apparent cause. Their power over others was systematically stripped away as payment for their attempts to control you. The innocent found their carefully constructed reputation crumbling in ways that seemed almost supernatural. Old lies would resurface at the worst possible moments, contradictions in their stories would be exposed by coincidental encounters, and people they had manipulated would suddenly remember conversations they had previously forgotten. Their web of deception was unraveling faster than they could repair it. The investigators' case was reaching critical mass. They had connected your situation to numerous other chosen ones who had been targeted by the same network across different regions and time periods. Some of those individuals had been successfully destroyed, their gifts stolen, their purposes derailed, their lives ended either literally or figuratively. Others had survived with varying degrees of damage, their testimonies adding crucial elements to the growing body of evidence. But your case was different. The protection around you was stronger than anything the investigator had seen before. The spiritual forces mobilizing on your behalf were operating at a level that suggested your role in the cosmic order was far more significant than even you understood. Your survival wasn't just important for your own journey, it was essential for the protection of future chosen ones who would face similar attacks. The investigator had begun noticing patterns that suggested your ordeal was part of a much larger cosmic shift. Other networks of spiritual predators around the world were simultaneously experiencing similar collapses. Ancient systems of protection that had been dormant for generations were reactivating. The very fabric of reality seemed to be reorganizing itself to better shield light-bearers from the forces that had hunted them for millennia. The witness who had been gathering information from within the conspiracy finally made contact with the investigator. The meeting was arranged with elaborate precautions, as both parties understood the deadly seriousness of what they were dealing with. When the evidence was shared, when the testimonies were compared, when the full scope of the network's activities became clear, even the experienced investigator was stunned by the magnitude of the evil they were confronting. During this clandestine meeting, the witness revealed details that transformed the investigation from a criminal case into something approaching cosmic intervention. The conspiracy against you had been planned as a test case, a proving ground for techniques that would later be deployed against chosen ones globally. Your destruction was meant to be the first domino in a cascade of targeted attacks that would systematically eliminate divine light-bearers from the earthly plane. The network had developed sophisticated methods for identifying potential chosen ones before their gifts fully manifested. They infiltrated spiritual communities, monitored online forums, and even placed operatives within healing and metaphysical practices. Their goal was to catch light-bearers during their awakening process, when they were most vulnerable and least protected. But their plan contained a fatal flaw that none of them had anticipated. By targeting you specifically, they had unknowingly triggered ancient protective protocols that existed beyond their understanding or control. Your bloodline carried genetic and spiritual markers that activated defensive systems they didn't even know existed. Their attack on you was essentially an attack on the divine order itself, and the universe had responded accordingly. The evidence that was revealed went far beyond what anyone had imagined. This wasn't just a small group of spiritually bankrupt individuals operating in isolation. They were connected to something larger, something more sinister, a network that trafficked in stolen spiritual energy, that built power through the systematic destruction of divine light-bearers. You weren't just a random target. You were specifically chosen because your gifts threatened their entire operation. The network had been operating across multiple generations, passing down techniques for identifying and destroying chosen ones from one group of practitioners to the next. They had infiltrated spiritual communities, corrupted healing practices, and turned sacred knowledge into weapons of destruction. Their ultimate goal was nothing less than the elimination of divine light from the earthly plane, creating a reality where only their darkness could thrive. Your bloodline had been specifically targeted because of its history of producing powerful light-bearers. Previous generations had faced similar attacks, though the methods had evolved over time. Some of your ancestors had been destroyed, their gifts lost forever. Others had survived but carried trauma that affected their ability to fully embody their purpose. You were the culmination of generations of preparation, the one who had been equipped to not just survive but to dismantle the entire system. But what the network hadn't counted on was the possibility that their own documentation would become evidence against them. The meticulous records they kept, intended to improve their future operations, instead provided investigators with a comprehensive map of their criminal activities. Names, dates, methods, victims, everything was catalogued with the kind of detail that prosecutors dream of finding. The investigation reached its crescendo when the insider who had been feeding information to authorities delivered the final piece of evidence needed to complete the case. This evidence wasn't just documentation of planning or intention. It was proof of previous actions, previous victims, previous crimes that had been carefully concealed. The gravity of what was revealed sent shockwaves through everyone involved, including law enforcement officials who had seen the worst of human nature, but had never encountered evil quite this calculated. As arrests began, as the network started to collapse, as justice finally manifested in the physical realm, something remarkable happened to you. The trauma that was meant to destroy you instead transformed into a source of unprecedented spiritual power. Your gifts, which they had tried to steal, multiplied exponentially. Your connection to divine wisdom, which they had attempted to sever, became unbreakable. Your purpose, which they had sought to erase, blazed forth with clarity that illuminated everything around you. The seducer broke first, overwhelmed by the reality of facing consequences in both spiritual and physical realms, they confessed to authorities, hoping for leniency, not understanding that divine justice operates independently of human legal systems. Their testimony provided crucial details about the network's operations, including the locations of other ongoing attacks against chosen ones. The innocents' carefully constructed lies crumbled under scrutiny, exposing them as anything but innocent. Their role in the psychological warfare campaign was revealed in all its calculated cruelty, showing how they had systematically isolated you while pretending to offer support. The contrast between their public persona and their private actions was so stark that even people who had believed their stories felt disgusted by their own gullibility. The mastermind's downfall was the most spectacular because it was the most complete. Their spiritual blindness had become so total that they walked directly into traps that any reasonably aware person would have avoided. They made statements to undercover investigators, left evidence in plain sight, and trusted people who had already turned against them. Their arrogance had become their undoing in the most literal sense. But perhaps the most devastating blow to the mastermind was the realization that their entire worldview had been built on a fundamental misunderstanding of how spiritual power actually works. They had believed that gifts could be stolen, that divine connection could be transferred, that destruction of light-bearers would somehow elevate their own status in the cosmic order. Instead, their attacks had only strengthened their targets while weakening themselves. The mastermind's network of contacts, their carefully cultivated relationships, their accumulated resources, all of it crumbled as the truth emerged. Former allies distanced themselves, spiritual communities expelled them, and even their own family members turned away in horror at what they had become. Look, you already know the game is rigged, and if you're paying attention, you know the walls are closing in. So let's talk about what we're doing about it. When you live by the day at the market's command, where profit and property rule the land, to be heard, to be held, to be dealt a fair hand, these are the things that a people demand, and we hear you. The Obsidian Inner Order has paywalls, yes. Those who stand with us, who fuel this mission, they give us ammunition to fight the Archons, to push back against the machine, to go deeper, to uncover more. And as our thank you, paid members get access to a 1-hour live, personalized weekly group tarot reading guidance, insight, and clarity for the road ahead. But kicking a man for being down on the floor, that's something we cannot ignore. That's why starting today, you can steal the Astral Atom exclusive daily newsletter for free. No paywall, no catch, just join the Patreon free tier link in the description. This is the start of our conversation with you, and it's bi-directional. You can reply to any email we send you. We'll read it, we'll hear you, and we'll do our best to get an answer to you from the universe itself. If you can support, we need you. If you can't, take what's free. The Obsidian Inner Order is open. Now let's get back to work. As the dust settled, as justice was served, as the network of spiritual predators faced consequences they never imagined possible, you found yourself fundamentally changed. The person who had been targeted for destruction had become someone else entirely, someone stronger, wiser, more connected to divine purpose than ever before. The gifts they had tried to steal now blazed with power that could light up entire communities of seeking souls. Your transformation wasn't just personal, it was cosmic in scope. The very attempt to destroy you had triggered an evolution in your spiritual capabilities that wouldn't have occurred under normal circumstances. The intense pressure they had applied to break you instead forged you into something far more powerful than they could have imagined. Like a diamond formed under geological pressure, your soul had been compressed and refined until it achieved a level of spiritual density that made you virtually impervious to future attacks. The failed seduction attempts had actually strengthened your ability to discern authentic connections from artificial ones. Every manipulation they had tried taught you to recognize similar tactics instantly, creating an intuitive warning system that would protect you for the rest of your incarnation. Your heart chakra, which they had targeted so intensively, now operated at a frequency that naturally repelled deceptive individuals while attracting genuine souls seeking truth. The psychological warfare campaign that was meant to isolate you instead clarified your understanding of authentic relationships. As the artificial connections fell away, as the manipulated allies revealed their true nature, space was created for genuine spiritual family members to enter your life. People began appearing who recognized your true nature without explanation, who offered support without expectation, who understood your mission without needing to be convinced of its importance. Your role shifted from potential victim to active protector. Other chosen ones began gravitating toward your energy, sensing in you someone who had walked through the valley of shadow and emerged not just intact but transformed. Your story became a beacon of hope for others facing similar darkness, proof that divine protection is real and that evil ultimately devours itself. The development of your protective abilities created a ripple effect that extended far beyond your personal sphere. Family members who had been carrying ancestral trauma found themselves spontaneously healing. Friends who had been struggling with their own spiritual development suddenly experienced breakthroughs. Even strangers who came into contact with your energy reported feeling inexplicably uplifted and protected. Your enhanced discernment became legendary among those who witnessed it in action. You could sense spiritual attacks before they materialized, recognize energy vampires within moments of meeting them, and identify authentic spiritual practitioners from those who had been corrupted by dark influences. This ability made you invaluable to communities of lightworkers who had been struggling to identify infiltrators and energy predators within their ranks. The investigator, having successfully dismantled the network that had targeted you, began working with you to develop protocols for protecting other chosen ones. Your experience provided crucial insights into how these attacks operated, what vulnerabilities they exploited, and what forms of protection proved most effective. Together, you created a framework that could be shared with spiritual communities worldwide. The family member who had been working quietly behind the scenes to expose the truth revealed themselves to you, and their betrayal of the conspirators was explained as an act of profound love and protection. They had risked everything to ensure your safety, had endured accusations of treachery from people they once considered allies, and had sacrificed relationships to preserve your life. Their courage in choosing truth over comfort became a cornerstone of your healing process. This family member's sacrifice illuminated an important truth about the nature of loyalty and love. True loyalty, you realized, sometimes requires betraying those who would harm the innocent. True love sometimes demands actions that appear cruel to those who don't understand the larger context. Their willingness to be misunderstood in order to protect you demonstrated a level of spiritual maturity that transformed your understanding of what family really means. But perhaps the most powerful revelation was understanding that this entire ordeal had been orchestrated on a level far beyond human comprehension. Your soul had agreed to this experience before incarnating, knowing that surviving such targeted darkness would forge you into a spiritual warrior capable of protecting other chosen ones facing similar attacks. Every moment of confusion, every instance of betrayal, every second of fear had been preparation for your true calling. The generational patterns that had made you vulnerable to such attacks were finally broken. Curses that had followed your bloodline for centuries were dissolved in the fire of your transformation. Family members who had been carrying inherited trauma found their own healing as a result of your victory over darkness. The ripple effects of your survival extended backward and forward through time, liberating ancestors and protecting descendants you would never meet. The spiritual territory around you expanded exponentially, where once you had been vulnerable to attacks from multiple directions, now you controlled your own energetic space with absolute authority. The lessons learned from surviving calculated evil had taught you to recognize danger before it could establish any foothold in your reality. Your discernment became legendary among those who knew your story. Years later, as you look back on this chapter of your existence, the full magnitude of what transpired becomes clear. What seemed like the worst thing that could happen to you was actually the greatest gift you could have received. The attempt to destroy your light only made it burn brighter. The effort to steal your gifts only multiplied them beyond measure. The conspiracy to erase your purpose only clarified it with crystal precision. The individuals who orchestrated this darkness against you serve life sentences in various forms, some behind physical bars, others trapped in spiritual prisons of their own making. all of them cut off from the divine connection they tried to corrupt. Their attempt to climb higher by standing on your grave instead created the very foundation that launched you into heights they could never have imagined. And now, chosen one, as this message reaches its conclusion, we return to where we began, with that gnawing feeling in your gut, those sleepless nights, those sudden changes in people's behavior. But now you understand what your soul was trying to tell you. Now you recognize the spiritual warfare for what it was. Now you see how your divine protection operated even when you couldn't perceive it. The confusion is lifting, the pieces are falling into place, and the truth is setting you free in ways that will continue unfolding for years to come. Your vindication is complete, your protection is absolute, and your future is blazing with possibilities that your enemies never dreamed could exist. The inner child that was wounded by their attacks has been healed by divine love and transformed into a source of playful power that threatens nothing good but terrifies everything evil. The light that they tried to extinguish now shines with such intensity that other lost souls can navigate towards safety by following its beacon. The gifts that they attempted to plunder now serve their highest purpose, protecting and empowering the spiritual family you were always meant to lead. This is your confirmation. This is your clarity. This is the moment when everything that was done in darkness is finally brought into the light, examined, understood, and transformed into fuel for your continued ascension. The battle is over, chosen one. The victory is yours, and the best is yet to